Sorry, I was a little distracted by today's headline news. Courtney facing critical housing challenges. We're going to talk a little bit about that right now. But we're going to talk about the not so happy end of it, which is homelessness. So the two questions that I get asked most often is, how did we get here? And what's the best way that we can help? So I'm going to talk about those two things. So the first question, how did we get here? The state of homelessness is a direct result of disconnection. Disconnections from our government policies, disconnections in our communities, and disconnections with each other. We see these disconnects in causes, in how we understand homelessness, and also in the way that we respond to it as well. So consider the concept that we have always had homeless people in our society. Homelessness is neither new nor inevitable. We are currently in a 30-year period of homelessness that began in the 1980s. The previous period of homelessness was in the Great Depression. Is that clicking in my ears? So prior to that, we saw a relatively short period of homelessness in the Great Depression. Observe the long-held stereotypical view of a homeless person. Do I get an extra minute for this? Sweet. So reality is that this grizzly older man that we see here on the park bench with his shopping trolley, for instance, is now being replaced by low-income families, women with children most often, but also being replaced with young people, being replaced by Aboriginal people and increasingly seniors. Many people living homeless are actually hidden. They're staying on couches, they're staying with friends, they're living in cars. They're living in units and housing things that are not fit for human habitation. So for every one person that you may see on the street, more likely there's 4 other people who are hidden from view. So what's the number one reason that we have homelessness today? Poverty. So while many Canadians still believe that we can all have a go of it, we can get ahead, increasingly the odds for the majority of us are actually stacked against us. So the Broadbent Institute did a study on wealth inequality in Canada. They used 2012 data and they found staggering inequality. So 70% of Canada's wealth is owned by the top 20% of the population. The richest 86 families own more than the bottom 11 million Canadians. The bottom half of Canadians, they only own about 6%. The bottom 10% owe more than they own. Yet when asked, most Canadians think about that 20%, the lowest 20% own about 5%. So where do you think that you sit in this distribution? Since the 1980s, unfortunately, support from our governments has also decreased. We've seen reduction in benefits such as social assistance and disability. In the 1990s, we saw the federal government withdraw their investment in affordable housing. So, alongside rising rents, declining wages, a minimum wage in BC that if you're on it full time, you're still not over the poverty line. There's no new housing coming from the province, and hydro rates are increasing. Canada remains the only G8 country that doesn't have a national housing strategy. So where does this leave us? 1 in 5 households are in extreme housing affordability, such as these headlines are telling us. So here we are with growing poverty. Now, if you're Aboriginal, if you have a disability, if you were just released from an institution, or maybe you don't have any social network in your community, you're going to be more at risk of homelessness. So take that situation and now add to it a change in personal circumstance. I just lost my job. I'm getting a divorce. Add to that maybe that Or consider that you have cognitive impairments. They may be caused by a mental health disorder, or addictions, or a brain injury. So when these individual factors collide with those big social factors, all of a sudden, you're now homeless. Increasingly, anyone can become vulnerable to losing their housing. And I can assure you that homelessness is not a choice. A rare individual may choose not to be part of our social structures, choose not to jump through all the hoops that the politicians have put before them, but they're not choosing homelessness. So here you are, finding yourself, you can't make rent, or you've lost your housing entirely. Public perception is that we have safety nets to catch our most vulnerable citizens and help bounce them back to self-reliance. But unfortunately, if you do need assistance, often, and especially if you do not have a fixed address, you're more likely to experience some of these barriers. So here you are, going to the services that you want to get some help, and this is some of the things that you may come up against. Not so helpful in your stress state. Now imagine having multiple challenges. So many people fall into homelessness and are trapped in the state of homelessness because of the failings of our governments, our support services, and our health systems. Due to lack of resources, yes, but also because policy directives and funding requirements impose constraints, limitations. They force services to work in silos. So practitioners who are working with the same client or the same families cannot even talk to each other. They can't share any information. Yet we know this is very unnatural. Social organisations and non-profits have been set up to compete with each other. They're fighting for survival, for even less funding than ever before. They simply do not have the capacity to effectively do the job they want to do. And neither can they broadcast interesting information that would galvanise some help, such as this. This is the costs of how we currently manage homelessness versus the costs if we housed everyone who was homeless. It's quite the difference. So as demand increases and the problems exacerbate, so does the experience of learned helplessness. At a community and organisational level, we again see some more disconnects, and it often results in inaction. Without alignment to an effective strategy, usually a community plan, and the supporting resources to implement it, we see a diffusion of responsibility and a lack of accountability. It's the province's job. It's the Fed's job. It's somebody else's job. Inaction occurs also because of personal biases and prejudices. Consider the mass-marketed messages that we've received over the last few decades. Have a home, get a good job, keep up with the Joneses. Add to this the stigma of alcohol and drug addiction, having a mental health issue, and this translates into pretty deep fear and pretty deep threats against people's personal identities. This plays out as NIMBYism, not in my backyard. And it also plays out as a misinterpretation of homelessness as a moral and ethical issue, when in reality, it is a health and human rights issue. So with all these disconnects in information, in services, policies, in values, it becomes easier to understand how do we get here. It's been an unfortunate, extremely unfortunate, perfect storm over the last few decades. And it's been our most vulnerable citizens who have felt the full force of it. But I tell you, I think in reality, it's failing us all. Because I think that perhaps one of the most insidious disconnects really is reflected in our own discomfort when we face someone who is living in homelessness. What causes us to look away and to avoid eye contact? I'd suggest it's a lack of self-respect. Because as we look away, we deny and disconnect from that very part of us that is just reaching out to their own kind. Because it's our humanity which calls us to act, to offer some assistance, or to simply acknowledge the presence of another. Fortunately, our culture is becoming increasingly conscious. We're raising our awareness. We're rethinking how we relate to our environment, to how we relate to our material goods, and how we relate to each other. We've come out of the illusion of human superiority, out of the spell of consumerism and unabated growth. We are reacquainting ourselves with our humanity and our interconnectedness with our natural world, and we are recreating balance in our lives. People in communities across Canada are taking advantage of our more conscious viewpoint to go beyond previous beliefs, beyond limits in their quest to end homelessness. They let go of judgments, they step out of the burden of past mistakes and the heaviness of perceived complexity and learned helplessness. We are all opening ourselves to questions that shift our perception, change our minds, and therefore our actions. And it's from this place that we can answer that question: what is the best thing that we can do to help? So all these cities that you see before you are making a shift. They're making a shift from managing homelessness to ending it. A shift from stopgap measures and emergency provisions to focusing all efforts on ending homelessness, and that is creating access to safe, secure, and adequate housing for all of their community members. So affordable housing, income, and connecting those systems back up in efforts to prevent homelessness are what are their key aims. We are refocusing connecting people with information, with resources, and with opportunities where they are needed most. In observing the success of these communities, there's 3 common characteristics in both the people and their actions that are making a real, genuine difference. So what's the best way that I or we can help? Leadership, heart intelligence, and capacity. These 3 interconnected elements are available to all of us, every single one of us. And it's in using them that we create a very powerful leverage that all our members within our communities can play a part to end homelessness once and for all. So let's take a few examples of how that happens. Let's take leadership. Does everyone remember back in 2013 where Rachel Janskalski went to the council and she told them about her I Can project? Yeah. Everyone is a leader at their school, at their home, at their workplace, in the board, and also when you stand in line at the grocery store or maybe out the front of a library. Everyone's a leader. We all have the power to lead others. A good example of shared leadership is in Victoria, BC, Down Island. So the Victoria Real Estate Board quickly followed the Downtown Victoria Business Association when they joined in the startup of the Greater Victoria Ending Homelessness Coalition. This is a backbone organisation that, one, creates the plan and then makes sure that the initiatives are all focused in the right direction and supports it to happen through implementation. This is a really great model of shared leadership. So when they came along, they brought their business sense and their skills alongside their really terrific resources and amazing networks, and it was crucial to the success of the coalition. So, and currently the Mayor, Dean Fortin, is their co-chair. But politicians need you to lead them to social change and innovation. Ensure that they know where you stand. Share your ideas, your support, and tell them, if needed, they have to act. Here's some of the ways that in Kelowna they get the whole community together and do a fundraiser where they do a shopping cart adventure race. And then they do music and barbecue afterwards, and everyone gets involved. And it's a public awareness raising campaign. So self-leadership is also about challenging your own behaviours and to learn and to grow. Be courageous in your personal development and ask yourself, am I still acting on old information? Is this really true? Choose not to passively accept the status quo. Be more like an Australian. Don't be so polite. Okay? Question others in their opinions of homelessness. Heart intelligence. So this is where we access both sides of our brain, our rational side and our more analogical, intuitive side. We bring our full selves to the table. So a good example of how we can use our heart intelligence is actually reflected in our the biggest way that we're now looking at ending homelessness, which is called housing first. And it's been proven by clinical trials now. And it basically says, you know what, if a person needs housing first, before they can even consider thinking about other things like their psychological challenges or learning how to read, you have to have housing first. So community members are combining research, best practices with compassion, generosity and creativity. Here's a great small-scale sample of the Edmonton Public Library, very relevant for our community. They were the first to employ social workers. So they deliver outreach at the library, and it's so successful they're expanding it to their other branches, and we know that there's 5 other Canadian cities where social workers are employed by the library. So consider your heart intelligence when you join with other initiatives and contribute to social housing, contribute to social inclusion projects and creating job opportunities. Let's talk about capacity. The reality is, if we rely on governments alone, we're going to continue to experience a severe lack of affordable and social housing and severely underfunded services. We, communities, must look within and act together to get this job done. So who are these happy guys? No, they're not politicians. They're actually Calgary home builders, and they just pledged $1.4 million to build apartment buildings which non-profits will then manage. When you combine business and housing development with the clinical experience of services and housing providers, it's a force to be reckoned with. So what's needed? Financial assistance and resources, absolutely. But we also need skills, network, and your enthusiasm. Your enthusiasm is so key in a sector that is consistently burnt out. Communication skills, research, marketing, business development, all wonderful things to bring to the table. Alongside your creative energy and your resourcefulness, it has a massive impact. Design a challenging media project to shake up some perceptual realities, understandings, such as raising the roof. Offer to help with a crowdsourcing campaign. Direct your company's social responsibility efforts to creating housing for all. So when it comes to homelessness, we got here because of disconnections. But now, we're reconnecting with what matters most. What's the best way that you can help? Take your current drive to be a more conscious person, a more conscious leader, a more conscious business. Bring your leadership skills, your heart intelligence, and whatever capacity that you can, and join in the movement to end homelessness. Your ideas, your action, in your voice is what we need to help make that happen. I share the vision, along with many in our communities, that soon we're not going to be talking about homelessness anymore. The word will become obsolete. Instead, we will act to cherish all community members, we'll appreciate their unique gifts and their impressive resiliency. Everyone will have the housing that they need, and we'll be living in a thriving world where we can all be healthy and safe, and we can all contribute our best selves, just like we all hope to do. Thanks.